This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jim McDonald. Unfortunately, Jeff Stedman was not able to make it to this episode. He's traveling. He's on his 20th wedding anniversary. So I recommend everybody DM him and just congratulate him on that, him and his wife on that major milestone. Actually, it's a bigger milestone for his wife because she was able to put up with him for 20 plus years. And I think that's quite the accomplishment. So yay, Barb. Having fun with that, but we'll be back together next week. Jeff and I are doing the FIDO feud at the Authenticate conference. By the time you're hearing this, that will be in the past, but it's something that if we can capture the video and audio, we'll be putting it out here. It's always something fun. It'll be a little extra episode for our listeners. So today we've got a really fun episode. You know, I always think of the Identity at the Center podcast as an international phenomenon. It's maybe not a phenomenon, but we've got a global listener base, and we definitely pay a lot of respect to that. And we really appreciate all of our listeners inside the U.S. and outside the U.S. Like, we appreciate all of you, but it's great that so many people tune in. And we try to keep it so that we don't become too U.S. centric or too U.S. focused. And, you know, to that end, last year, Jeff and I went to the Cooper & Cole conference in the European Identity and Cloud Conference in Berlin, Germany. And there's somebody that we've seen for multiple times, and we've always been talking about getting him on the podcast. Well, guess what? Today is that day. I wanted to introduce Sebastian Rohr. He's the Chief Troublemaker over at Umbrella Labs. Welcome to the show, Sebastian.
Thanks for having me. And I am really humbled, proud, honored. I've been following the show for quite some time, and I really love what you do for the community. So yeah, I was really, really itching, scratching to be a part of the phenomenon. Yes, it is one. And yes, you have multiple fans here in Europe. And I really loved that you were able to bring your entourage over to Europe for the Identity at the Center Euro Tour 2025, seeing you in Berlin, and also having one of our little breakout sessions in the beer garden. That was definitely a highlight.
Yeah, thank you very much. And by the way, our entourage is myself and Jeff. And but we did make it out to the Identity Beer. I think that's what you're referring to.
Exactly, the Identity Beer
Sebastian,
meetup.
You know, I wanted to make sure, you know, before every episode, to make sure that our guest has a drink nearby in case you get choked up. I mean, identity is such a emotional topic that you might get choked up as you're speaking. Do you have something to drink?
I wouldn't be who I am if I had one of those around. That's the famous Identity Beer I'm holding into the camera for those of you guys who are listening only. It's been a pleasure to have my own drink with me here, my own brand of drinks. And that's going to keep my throat lubricated for the next minutes.
Okay, good. And so you wanted to make sure that everybody knew it was after 5 p.m. in Germany, so it was okay that you cracked into the alcohol. You know, it's well endorsed by me. I think that's fine. If you want to have a beer, it's about 9:30 a.m. where I am. If you want to have a beer right now, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's actually 4 o'clock because it rhymes. Beer and fear, so beer and four are the words. So we always say no beer before fear. So that is ample time. I'm really, really good. I'm already 1 hour 15 behind to start drinking. And to be honest, 9:30 a.m. would be an ample time to have a wheat beer here in Germany, in Bavaria too, because there is such a thing called the Weißwurst Frühstück, so white sausage breakfast, and it always goes with salted pretzels and a wheat beer. So if you come over to Germany, if you come over to Bavaria, you will see people sitting in the beer garden at 9:30, 10 a.m., eating a Weisswurst and drinking a beer.
That sounds like an early nap for me. Like that's going to result in an early nap, and then I go back out again later. That sounds interesting. Maybe I'll have to try that next time in Berlin.
You should.
So we're going to talk a lot today about decentralized identity, and I'd say it's the intersection or conversions of real world physical identity and this, online identity concept and where it's going and where it is today and where it will be in the future. But it would be remiss of me every time we have a new guest on the Identity Center podcast. We want to know, what is your origin story? How did you get into identity? Is this something you chose, or did identity choose you?
So I definitely say it's identity chose me because, well, again, for those of you who are not listening in, I'm actually holding up my badge here from my employer from back in 1998 when I joined German Siemens Corporation. They actually had a product called Dirix Meta Directory. I think it's still on the market today, sold by Atos or something. So it's really old. So I started working with identity management products long before they were called that way in the late 90s. And I still recall that back in that day, we had those buggers here. I'm holding up a token, an OTP token. We had VPN, we had antivirus, we had firewalls, and that was it about security. So the concept of having a directory service, a meta directory service back in the day was really, really, really new and really niche. And yeah, somehow that stuck despite the fact that I got a little detour after that, going back to a research institute for a few years. I think identity chose me because it kept pulling me back in no matter what I tried to do in the security sector outside of identity.
I think it shows most of us. I mean, that's definitely the most common response that we get is, especially for folks who've been out of school for the last 20 years, really identity wasn't even much of an industry at that time. It was, but there weren't that many people focused on it yet. And to your point, you try your hardest to get out of the industry. Most people never do, and it's to their benefit in the long run. So, I wanted to kind of set the stage because you recently did a webinar that I picked up, and you talked about how IAM interferes with your life as an individual. And I wanted to kind of start the conversation right there. What did you mean when you said that?
So in the recent years, we've, especially here in Europe, but also in the US with the mobile driver's license talks, we've seen an uptake in the interest of nation states to actually provide a digital identity for their citizens. And that started quite a bit ago. And I will be holding up a fake German identity card, which has a nice holographic feature on it. It switches between a lioness and a blonde woman here. And you can see that it actually blends out some of the personal information, the PII on that document, that partial disclosure and minimum disclosure of information. That is something that in Germany was already being showcased between my former employer, the Microsoft Corporation, and the German federal government, because they wanted to establish the electronic identity component of the German ID card. So for you folks out there in the US, you'll have driver's licenses and you have a passport when you travel abroad. We in Europe actually have digital, physical identity cards, and it's mandatory to have them. You are obliged to have it with you when you hit 16. You have to have that on you all the time. And those have been extended with digital components over the last 1.5 decades, I would say, almost 2 decades. But the adoption, especially here in Germany, has been a little weak. But in the end, it all boils down to the fact that whenever we do digital identity in the workforce for customers, it's KYC, know your customer. At some point in time, during the onboarding process, no matter if you are a customer, if you are a supplier, if you are an employee, somebody will ask you for some kind of legal identity document, a passport, a driver's license, an ID card. But how do you get that if you can't prove to the authorities that you are really Jim McDonald? How would you do that in the absence of an ID card and a passport? Because I don't know, they got stolen, you lost them. How do you do that? How do you prove that you are Jim McDonald?
Yeah, I mean, this is the core of the conversation, right? Because we talked about the podcast reaching a global audience. Well, it's not just the Western world. So let's level set. Let's talk a little bit about how identity verification works in the Western world, because you kind of touched on a few of the concepts, but let's take it and just set that as a baseline.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we had mail order like 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, before the internet, before certain large retailers, online retailers became a thing, we had those mail order catalogs. And I think they were big in the US from the 1800s on. I think in the Wild Wild West, you got those printed mail order catalogs and you could buy. Well, for you guys in the US, it's absolutely normal that you go into the next Walmart and you buy a Winchester 308, right? Why you can't buy weapons in our grocery stores, but you can buy booze, and you just have to be 18. You can buy beer or wine. You just have to be 16, and you got to prove that to the cashier. The famous Identity 2.0 presentation by Descartes from the early 2000s showed that quite nicely. You got to show your ID card. Unless you do that, you don't get your booth. How do you do that online? How do you do that with a mail order catalog provider? Well, we in Germany had something that was called Postident. So our public post office service, US Post Service, you would walk into that office with a small card that the mail order guys sent you, and they requested identity verification through a trusted third party, which would be the post office clerk. So you go up to the store clerk and show them your ID, and they will fill in that form. They will stamp it because, well, in Germany, the post office clerks were actually state employees. They were public servants, so they had a certain legit way of proving that you are in fact Jim McDonald. Um, that changed quite a bit in the last decade. Online verification services have been all the rage. When I got one of those new fintech bank accounts, I installed the app, and that was on a Thursday evening, I think at 9 p.m. or so. And I went through the registration, and then it asked me, "Oh, are you in a broadband connected house?" I said, "Yes." Do you have your ID or your passport with you? Yes. Would you have 5 minutes to prove your identity? I said, yes. And so the next thing that happens inside the app, I get a video phone call, and a guy comes up in a black suit, white shirt, black tie, and a really, really oversized noise cancellation headset. He more looked like a Counter-Strike gamer in business attire. As I said, it was like 10 p.m. In the night, and that's really, really strange for Germany because, well, office hours are much shorter. And well, he went through that whole verification process with me, showing my ID card up to my head, turning it around, checking all the security features of the ID card and stuff like that. And bam, I was verified. Next Saturday, so like 36 hours later, I had my credit card in the post. That was like, wow, I was blown away by that. And that whole process is quite expensive, as you can imagine. And we've been digging deeper into ways of proving documents, vetting documents, and making really sure that you are really Jim McDonald up to a certain level that you need, and that is quite a high level if you want to open a new bank account, but money laundry and stuff like that. So yeah, it's all about your ID card. It's all about your national ID. But still, how do you get one if you lose it?
Yeah, you've worked a lot with identity verification technology over your career. And I kind of want to get your feedback because I've mostly had positive experiences when I've used it myself, but I've also heard from other folks that they've run into issues a lot with verifiable credentials and using kind of that liveness detection, the selfie scenario. Even my own son ran into a scenario where he tried to open a crypto wallet and he couldn't get through the verification process. So I'm sure there would have been a it's kind of, I feel like I'm getting half the story from him, but he did have some pretty dramatic weight loss. And he went from, 16 when he got his driver's license, he just turned 18. I know that when I had my driver's license done, it was like 8 years until I could get a new picture. And going different places, like even TSA, folks were looking at it, or the security folks were looking at it like, is this really you? You look different. Well, my beard is thicker now, and my hairline is, it's so much better than it was 8 years ago. That's not the way hairlines work, by the way. No, it just, it starts to look different than your ID, especially to a human. But I would think that the verification systems have trouble with that sometimes too. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So let me show you another war story on that. It's not about the ID card verification, but signature verification. So when I got my first bank account, I was like 14, I think, is the legal age where you get a normal normal debit banking account because, I needed one for whatever reason, or getting money wired. That was a thing in the 1990s in Germany already. So as you can imagine, being like 14, when you have to sign a document, that signature doesn't look like my signature does today. So that was my savings bank in the small village that I grew up. And they actually have a signature card. So the actual paper card that I signed when I opened the account when I was 14. Of course, you do that, you forget about it. Fast forward 20 years, I'm already moved like 15 times, and I'm now like 1,000 miles away, living in a completely different state, still running that bank account because, why should I close it? It's nice. I knew the branch manager personally, so whenever I needed something, I just give her a call and she'll arrange everything, and we'll do the formalities later. That lady happens quit at some point in time, and so my personal relation is known by the branch manager was gone. And they asked me to fax them a written transfer note, like a signed note that I really authorized that transaction. And they called me back and they said, I'm really, really sorry. We are unable to wire that cash because there's a problem with your signature. I said, what? Yeah, I think you got to come back to the branch at some point in time because the signature card is from 1988 or something like that. And yeah, it was really a childish signature that was in the records. And of course, they were able to compare that and say, yes, that's Sebastian's signature. So yeah, signature verification is a form of identity verification in that case. And it failed miserably. And yeah, after that, I actually went there and said, yeah, we have two choices. Either I'll give you a new signature, but I don't think that makes sense. I'll just close the account. So that was that. But today, the problem really is if you do not have an ID card or a passport or whatever, you need some other legal document to show who you are, and that is usually a birth certificate. And the webinar that you are referencing to was exactly about that, and how I have been working in developing countries in the last 1.5 decades, helping them establish what they call CRVS services, civil registration and vital statistics services, because unfortunately, here in Europe and in North America, US, Canada, we have a birth registration rate where 100% of our children actually get a birth certificate automatically. But in other parts of the world, especially developing countries, especially Latin America, but even more so in Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific, that rate is lingering around 52%. And that's where the growth of our Earth population happens. So there's literally hundreds of millions of kids being born in that area who do not have a legal identity because they do not have a birth certificate to prove that they even exist. And that's bad.
So let's pick on that a little bit. I mean, that does sound like a real challenge. What do people do in those scenarios where they don't have the birth certificate? Do they just have to kind of work their way through the system to get one? Obviously, not everybody's going to do that. So this is not a problem that is going to be solved overnight. But I am interested about the individual who is highly motivated, maybe wants to go to university or something like that.
Yeah. So first of all, there is a thing that's called the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and that includes that we should have a legal identity for all of the kids. So they have a claim at the UNICEF that says make every child count, because every child counts, every life counts. So they try to improve the number of kids being registered. But unfortunately, if you and let's take Pakistan as an example, because I was on a UNICEF mission there. Many areas in Pakistan are very rural. There is no network, that there is no computer at hand. Childbirths are being given at home, not at the hospital. When they are at some sort of day clinic, there may be electricity, a telephone network, a broadband connection, mobile coverage. Not always. And literacy of the parents is also a problem. If you have to walk a day and a half to register your child that's just been born by your wife at home, but you are on a day's job, and then getting the certificate cost you, I don't know, 700 rupees, but you earn 500 rupees a day, actually registering your child makes you lose 1.5 days of work, and you have to pay 2 days of work or even more to get the certificate. Many people just skip it.
There's got to be a payback, right? I mean, if you're going to do that, and if you live in a rural village and you've never used a computer before, it's kind of hard to envision why your kids are ever going to need those things. I know, like, even in the Western world, right? We kind of came up in the generation where, I've kind of almost begged my dad to buy me a computer. He just thought it was a video game system. And maybe that's how I would have started to use it. I was, 13 or 14, but I really wanted to get a computer because I wanted to get in and do programming and stuff like that. But in his mind, it was like, that's a game. That's not something that's important to your future. So you can imagine how those parents kind of say, all right, well, this is going to cost a ton of money. What's the value? But
exactly,
things change over time.
Absolutely. And the thing is, basic education. Okay, there is the notion of homeschooling, but I would say the majority of children in the Western world, the parents receive a letter by the authority saying, "Oh, I have little Jim boy here. He just turned 6, right? So at least that's on the records. By the way, school starts in September, and we put him in North High School. This and this is the address. Please make sure he's capable of going back and from school. Let's go. If the government does not know that your kid exists because it doesn't have a registered birth at that address, who's going to ask that kid to go to school? If you do not have a birth registered child, how would you even get basic health care for that kid if it ever gets sick? Because that kid just doesn't exist. Here in Germany, you are mandated for, I think it's like half a dozen doctor's office visits with your child. If you do not comply, the police will come and get your child to that doctor to get that medical examination, like at 3 months, at 6 months, at 1 year, at 2 years, and so on. But what if the government doesn't know that your kid exists? How can they make that happen? If there is a famine, just imagine that the United Nations needs to supply food support to Gaza right now or to Ukraine. How do you know how many food portions, how many rations you need to send there if you do not know how many citizens there are? And it all boils down to that birth registration. If you do not exist in the systems, you cannot be accounted for. And that is a real big issue. And in the absence of that, well, we have some opportunities today with technology.
So, Sebastian, I loved how you were starting to go into various war stories, or we shouldn't even call them war stories since you just brought up like the Gaza situation. These aren't real war stories, by the way. This is, just examples that you've run into in your career. So you've done a lot with state issued identification, national ID card systems. I was wondering if you could share some of the stories that you were sharing with me as you were preparing. One was Ecuador. So I'll give you that intro. Take it from there.
Yeah.
I want to hear some real world stories.
Yeah, yo solo hablo un poco de español, but that was one of the reasons I was later invited to Ecuador. But it all started out in 2010. I already had like a good decade of identity management in the records. So the Inter-American Development Bank, which by the way sits in Washington, was asking if I could join a workshop in Jamaica with the government of Jamaica, with the planning institute of the government of Jamaica on establishing a Jamaica national ID scheme. And
sounds like a work vacation, by the way.
Being in Germany, going to Kingston, the capital of Jamaica, is a bit tricky. I would actually have had to go from Frankfurt to London to Miami to Kingston, and that would have been horribly expensive. And that's public service. They work with very small lump sums, and so my previous employer at that time, Kuppinger Cole, said no can do. It's going to be a loss for us if we send someone. But I said I'm so interested, and I asked them privately if I could do that, taking time off, and they said, well, whatever you like, but we still can't pay more than $5,000 for the whole thing. That's covering all. Said, okay, good. And I figured, and this is the fun thing about it, Jim. Of course, Jamaica is a holiday destination. And if you are willing to just take a package vacation trip, you will get a direct flight because it's charter. And that 1 week, all-inclusive vacation, I don't know, it was like $2,000. And I said, well, that sounds like a plan. I asked them if I could do that. I said, we don't care. We don't care how you get here. We don't care how you get back. Just make sure that it covers all your expenses. I said, done. So I actually booked a all-inclusive 1-week vacation to Jamaica, flew over, spent a few days in a really nice beach resort facing the Caribbean, and preparing the workshop that was supposed to be Thursday and Friday. And then they had me scheduled for a cross-country bus tour, which was really nice. I was the only white fellow in that bus. It was really, really funny. I had the 2 days workshop, and at the start of the week, they actually gave me a call, said, you're already in Jamaica, yeah? Right. So would you be able to extend your presentation a bit, because the guy who was supposed to come in from Argentina reporting on civil registry systems, he couldn't make it. He didn't get the check of the ministry. And I wired my friends back at Siemens, because I know that they sell civil registry services. Okay, give me some PowerPoints, give me a briefing. And then, well, that was 2010. So Skype, WebEx, and all that was just in the beginning. And so in the early morning on Wednesday, I actually had a call sitting in the lobby of that beach resort with the camera on and the Caribbean behind me, doing a call with the guys in Munich. They had like minus 10 degrees centigrade. It was snowing. It was fun. So yeah, that's how I actually got into that whole national identity stuff. And when I had just returned, they asked me if I could come back to Ecuador in April, because they were doing the same thing for the for the national ID system in Ecuador. And for you guys only listening, and I'm holding up a real Ecuadorian ID card here that was given to me as a token of appreciation by the Secretary of State of Ecuador back in the day, because he had actually studied in Germany and was fluent in German. And that opened a whole new world of identity management for me.
Those are some great stories. I'm sure you learned so much, but what I'd like to kind of ask you to do is, obviously this is a podcast for the identity practitioner, some of whom may be involved in doing this exact kind of work where they're creating state issued IDs, or are thinking about doing something where it kind of is a decentralized identity approach. What are the tips that you might have for those folks?
Yeah. So first of all, if you are from a enterprise identity management background and you want to enter the realm of national identity, driver's licenses, ID cards, whatever, do not think that the public services are even close to the technology level that you are used to. They are trailing behind like 10, 15 years. They might have top-notch biometric equipment, though, but the computer systems, the architectures, everything, we're using cloud first. No can do. ID cards are a matter of national security. Germany will never, ever put their national ID registration system on the cloud. It's an on-premise installation, right? Serving 90 million Germans. So that is really, really, really high security, secret level. And hence the architectures tend to be a little bit outdated. So do not demand too much of those guys. But you can be an inspiration. You can be the torch of enlightenment, the flame of enlightenment, bringing innovation there, because, well, especially my own folks here in Germany, they tend to over-engineer stuff. And a good example is actually our own ID card here. They developed their own authentication process and mechanism and standards that are supposedly better than what the ICAO, the organization that defines travel documents internationally, came up with. But well, it creates problems because interoperability and stuff, and high security, that's cost that's going to increase. So please be aware that technology might not be that state of the art if you enter the realm, and be kind with them. Do not try to give a Neanderthal caveman a hypersonic screwdriver, that they are just going to hurt themselves, right? So those are the first tips that I can share.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, kind of, I think what the practitioner always has to do is take the archaic ways done now, the brand new, newfangled technology, and come up with a pragmatic place. Like, here's how far we can get. Here's how much change our users can probably handle. I think it's all of our responsibility to find that right level. That's the art. It's not to let the way things are done now, to hold us back too much, so that we're really not getting much value, but not try to push things so far to the cutting edge that we wind up having a huge failure. So that's what I took away from what you said. Um, I wanted to go into a lightning round because we are kind of like,
course.
We are kind of getting to the point where we have really hit that topic good. And there's a lot of small topics. And I'd like to get just your 2-minute or less take on different things. And the big one that I wanted to bring up, so when we were at the EIC, the Cooper and Cole EIC last year, we did an interview, episode 354, if you're interested. It was with Christina and Torsten, talking about EUDI, or I'm sorry, EUID, and EUDI. And
EUDI it is, yeah.
I just wanted to get your take on what they're doing and how that's going to impact the world.
So first of all, having Ms. Yasuda and Torsten Lodderstedt working on that is a blessing. I personally went to Christina and thanked her. She is my savior, because we Germans tend to mess these things up royally. We overcomplicate it. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that those two identity heroes really save us and make that EUDI a success, because else I think we're going to screw that thing royally. As we mentioned before, the Baltic states are much ahead. They are leading the way, and I'd be happy if with EUDI we will come to a point where I, as a German citizen, can actually consume digital public services easily and in a secure manner. I'm really cheering these guys onwards. I really hope, for my own sanity and, well, comfort, that this is a success.
Yeah, I'm interested in kind of your concern there on potentially being the Baltic states being kind of like forward, the rest holding it back. What is your concern? Is it like bureaucracy? Is it just kind of like, hey, we don't want to change?
It's definitely a typical German thing we don't want to change. I could rant on for hours how digitalization, digital transformation in public services in Germany is going wrong. But let's have a beer over that when we're off the record. It's definitely the complexity of the whole thing, and some tendencies here in Europe and Germany to make stuff airtight, and that might be a problem. It's always a two-sided market, There needs to be the infrastructure provided by the European Union and the member states, so that there are interoperable ID cards that you can derive a digital identity from. But those need to be countered by a demand side, by services that actually accept these kinds of digital identities, state supported or state legitimized digital identities. Right now, people are like, well, I can't do anything with my electronic part of the ID card. Why should I activate it? We just had a talk about that on Monday, and one of the representatives said, as long as the public servant in the civil registry office tells you, oh, well, those digital services, yeah, forget it. You can't use them anyway because there is no meaningful adoption of it. That's a big issue. If that's going to fail, if we fail to create the services that leverage the EUDI wallets, then it's going to fail miserably.
Forgive me if I make a joke, but you're talking about how Germans like to keep things airtight, make sure that there's no flaws. That's probably why the world loves your cars. So there's some benefit to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, lightning round. Let's keep going. Bias in identity systems. I've never been sure if this could take up a whole episode or we could talk about this kind of quickly.
You could do a whole sub-series on that, and it starts with biometrics. Of course, there are certain areas in the world where the population only has very little distinctive marks in their fingerprints. There is the natural bias that a Eurasian person will have a hard time telling Asians from each other. Same goes the other way. And if you have certain other biometric features, they might not work the same way they do work in your population over in, let's say, Latin America, in Southeast Asia, in Africa. That is definitely a thing. And always remember, you and I, we not only share the same level of skin pigmentation, we also share the same alphabet. But in Europe, go to Greece, they have a completely different alphabet. Go to Turkey, they have completely odd characters. We Germans have our umlauts. Go to Scandinavia. If you want to be internationally interoperable, that's going to create a bias. And if you go really global, then see, like, every Southeast Asian country almost has their own alphabet and writing. That's crazy. If you want to translate those into our character set, there's so many ways to do it, right? So is it a Y? Is it a J? Crazy.
So I've kind of always thought when I heard bias in identity systems, look, it's not intentional, right? It kind of comes down to, like, bias isn't being written into systems intentionally. It's probably a factor of the data that's fed in, the number of samples are skewed toward Western appearance or something like that. Is that what it's coming down to?
Absolutely. We had that outrage with Gen AI when all the pictures that you created that had people in it, they were predominantly Caucasian persons. So because the training set they used were mostly Caucasian people in the photos, in the pictures. So yeah, of course there's bias, and the same applies. If it's not invented here, us Germans, we are quite light-skinned most of the time. Some of us have blue eyes, some of us dark eyes, some are blonde, some are red hair. But, well, that's sort of it. And if you have then a certain subset that you train your system on, if your engineers are from Denmark, of course, they will consider that you have certain spellings, certain special characters. If you are Italian, if you're French, you have certain accent aigu, accent circonflexe, whatever, in your character set. Well, if you're from Rwanda, if you're from Ecuador, if you're from Jamaica, quite different, right? If you're from South Korea, very different. And that diversity sometimes is a challenge if the engineering team is not diverse, but very, very local. And that happens all the time.
Yeah. So let's lightning round again. Let's talk about AI, because this is identity at the center, but we often joke it's AI at the center, becoming more and more every week. What is AI's impact going to be on all this? Because I really am finding as we develop applications, as applications grow, this is really a paradigm shift. You're not drilling into things on the web anymore. You're just telling AI what you want to have it do. It's changing the way we have to look at computing. So how's it going to change what's going on with state issued credentials?
Yeah. So, well, I have a hard time responding to that right away. So give me a moment to chew on that. But let me give you another example. Just yesterday, I had a great conversation with Toby, a partner from a software firm that we work with, and he explained to us how a certain keynote speaker figure that he knows personally is preparing their new speeches, and they are leveraging AI dramatically and in a very, very intricate way, in a very detailed and well thought through way that I never thought about it. And one of my engineers, also by the name of Toby, says, Sebastian, you're holding it wrong. It's like, the beer bottle, right? You can't drink from the beer bottle with the opening down, right? It's got to be the other way around. I think right now in AI for IAM, we're holding it wrong. We're not approaching it in the correct way. But I'll circle back to that. I really love what Martin Sunderen of IKEA is doing right now with his two bears. He has a polar bear and a brown bear, both stuffed animals of his employer that you can buy. And the one is AI for IAM, and the other one is IAM for AI, which are two completely separate things, right? The thing that gives me the most shivers right now is agentic AI and how to hedge it, how to fence it in, how to make sure that these AI agents that are supposed to do things on our behalf do not break out of the coral that I hope they would work in, right? Not buying a ticket to Las Vegas for Identiverse next year, but buying my whole company tickets. Like that was not what you were supposed to do. Find me a cheap ticket, not for everyone else. Stuff like that. That's going to be a tough nut to crack. And else, I say we will see minor optimizations for us professionals, quantum leaps of user experience and improvement for the users of IGA technology. For example, talking to your IGA system the way you talk with ChatGPT. Well, what entitlements does Jim have? How does that differ from Jeff's? Who's the outlier? What should be reduced? And then execute on that. Delete Jim. Well, I find that to be quite nice. But delete Jim. Do I have the authority to tell the AI to delete Jim? How does the IGA system know? How does the AI agent know if I have that authority? So we're going to see some change. I'm not sure if it's for the better or the worse right now.
I had a thought, because as you're talking about IAM for AI, I could see one of the subspaces within IAM being IAM for the multi-AI, just like we had IAM for the multi-cloud. I mean, I look at enterprises today, and a lot of them are saying, okay, we'll do Copilot because it plugs into all of our Office apps and great. But the users want ChatGPT. The users want Gemini. They want kind of these AI models that they're moving faster than what I see with Copilot anyway. You go to enterprises and you look at, they're doing Azure, AWS, they're doing Google Cloud. Depending on what applications they're developing, they want to use the cloud that's optimized for what they're doing. Why won't companies do the same thing with AI, or even set up their own AIs for their own applications? Now IAM becomes so much more complicated than, hey, if we're just doing Copilot, we can leverage what's in Entra. And if we get Entra right, then Copilot should, stop me from saying, hey, let me see the CEO's pay slip.
Yeah, this is going to be a real challenge. But let me sidestep for one little thing that I just learned Monday. one of our real big German engineering companies, Bosch, may have heard of them. They actually reported on that event that I was at Monday that they have created their own internal Gen AI landing page. Ask Bosch, I think they called it, and they have, and I'm for once again, I'm proud of German engineering because I really really liked it because they played around a little bit, but in a sandbox, and then they asked all of their employees for the use cases and scenarios that they would like to use AI in. And then they did a few of those POCs and actually came up with only two handful of applications for AI that they are now offering internally, and it saves them hundreds of thousands of euro per year. For example, translation of brochures for their electrical drills, creation of marketing material for the different geographies, but also for the different areas, departments of the organization. Crazy. I really like that. And that's going to be far more impactful than what we see in the small improvements that we have in identity management right now. But I'm really looking forward to what some of the vendors will release in the next few weeks. At least I had the honor to get a few previews, and if that materializes, like putting shackles on AI agents running wild and preventing the co-pilot to answer emails with company secrets because it was like prompt injection somewhere in the email. That's going to keep us on the back foot for quite some time because we now need to, well, secure what the AI guys just ignore because they just push forward to make that next quantum leap in functionality. It's we're going to have to pick up some broken glass at one point in time or the other.
I think we've had some really good discussions here. But I mean, Sebastian, I've got you on the podcast. I think it would be a huge miss if I didn't hit you with this last lightning round question. So I think of you and Espen Bago as like the Identibeer like founders, and you're the two people that come to mind when I think of Identibeer. At the same time, over the last year and a half, it's kind of become a global phenomenon, right? And it seems like, hey, I've moved to a new area, and I've been thinking about, hey, why don't I just have an Identibeer out here for the people out here? Why don't I just do that thing? So I want to ask you two questions. One, what makes a good Identibeer? And number two, is my idea like crazy? Like, is that something that people who want to help kind of pull the community together? Is Identibeer a good way to do that?
Yeah. So when we started this episode, you said that Identity at the Center podcast is a global phenomenon, and it is absolutely. You got followers all around the globe, and you're spreading your followership. First of all, though, on Identibeer, no, I'm far away from one of the founding fathers. It's definitely Espen, it's Sam. There are some other folks who have been in on that Identibeer meetups that started in Stockholm, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, and London. I was actually trailing behind, and the good German that I am, we came up with the idea of the physical Identibeers. And yes, that is my creation. A friend of mine, Eva, she came up with the idea. It's like kicking around and said, "Okay, I'll ask the local craft brewery to brew me a special concoction, and we'll just put a label on it." And now I'm happy that we finally this year actually started doing Identibeer meetups in Frankfurt. for the first time regularly, and also the pre-EIC conference ones that were not officially Identity Beer meetups, but let's say ID Pro themed meetups where also beer was happening. But now Benjamin Mewes and his friends officially kicked off the Berlin meetups. So what makes a good identity beer? Well, it's got to be German, right? So shout out to Alemity and IC Consult and all those who try to create their own beers around identity now. But it's Aspen Bargo's brainchild, and he is managing the community. So if you want to establish your community after work identity beer meetup, please reach out to Aspen Bargo. There is an identity beer community. Just get invited to that one by Aspen or some of the others, and they will guide you through establishing it. It's community. There is no sales. There's no product pitches. There is no no stuff and influencing going on. It's community driven. Just get together, talk all things identity, all things digital. We had visitors from the procurement service of the United States Embassy in Frankfurt last time, and she was just curious because she found that Identity Beer meetup in Frankfurt. I got to go there. That was so fun. She had nothing to do with identity management, but wow, you're welcome to listen in and learn, and just get there. And of course, if you do not drink alcohol, you're free to join. Nobody is forced to consume beer. There's lots of people just drinking Apfelschorle or a soda or just still water. We don't care. But it's all about the community. It's meeting other people that are enthusiastic or interested in identity, in digitalization, and you'll find a fun crowd to hang out with and just get a nice evening with some foreigners that turn to be friends afterwards.
So you mentioned Illimity, which that's Sam's company, right? Is that what you mentioned?
I actually don't know. That could be possible. I haven't made that connection yet. I only met him on a completely personal relation there. So that might be possible, but I know
believe
that
Illimity is a Belgian company, right? And so
yes, right.
They're
right,
competing
exactly.
with Germany for creating Athar beers, or Athar beer is yours, right? But let's just say
that's the purple one. Yeah,
they'll talk about the official beer of, and so I think there's this Belgian beer versus German beer debate. I'm not going to get into which one.
It's not beer.
Okay.
The Belgian concoction. If you bring that, well, Thomas is bringing their beer to Bavaria. You know, there is a trade fair going on in Nuremberg called ITSA right now, and I failed to get my Illimity beer. Apologies, I was so busy yesterday, I didn't have time for that. But I made fun of them because they said that they are bringing Illimity beer to the ITSA, and you know the German beer tradition requires you to be very, very clean in the beer brewing process. It's only hops, it's barley and water and nothing else. And the Belgians tend to stick cherries and strawberries and plums and vodka and whatever into their beer. Some of them are really, really delicious. But if you bring them to Germany, you wouldn't be allowed to sell them as German beers because, well, German beer is special. Yeah, but it's all friendly. It's all really, really fun and poking at each other. Whoever brings beer to the table is a friend.
That's what I figured. I figured I'd bring it up just to stir the pot a little bit. And now that it's been done, let's close out on a lighter note. I think that was kind of a lighter note, but here's the one that I prepared for today because we talked prior to our recording. You guys just celebrated like a national holiday called German Unification Day.
Yes.
Which I was not even aware existed. I guess it was the unification of East and West Germany, right? So that's,
Yeah, exactly.
I guess the name kind of like leads you to the answer. But what is the holiday? What is the background? And how did you celebrate it this year?
Yeah. So first of all, it's really important because it's the 35th anniversary. It was 1990, October 3rd. It's now what we say. It's the day the Berlin Wall fell down, and the celebration what was happening. So yeah, we had Eastern Germany, we had the Federal Republic and Eastern Germany, and now it's just Germany. But it hasn't been that way between 45 and 1990, two separate states. And it was a real great moment in history. I was 16 at the time, and I couldn't care less, to be honest. I was having a beer when I was 16, but right, that didn't have such an impact on me. But I can tell you that last week Friday we had that celebration. We actually met with a few friends here in one of the backyards. Did a great barbecue. I did a nice beef roast for the guys, and we had a nice keg from the craft brewery that does our identity beer. So what that like 3 gallons of good German beer we had, and we celebrated standing around the campfire, chugging a few beers and eating good food. There's no fireworks. There's no real big celebration like 4th of July in the US. It's much more toned down. You know, we Germans are we're like all introverts and no feelings. Yeah, but yeah, it was a good day. It was a good party. And there's still differences between the two parts, but my wife and I, we are the best example. I'm originally Western German from Hamburg area, and my wife is from Dresden in Eastern Germany. We have a wonderful daughter who, by the way, right now is in New York City in the United States right now. So my daughter is one of the best examples of how the German unification actually worked out.
Yeah, that's real unification, right? I mean, and by the way, I'm happy for her. She's in New York. I said she should go to the Yankees game tonight. They're still in the playoffs as of this recording. If they're still in the playoffs by the time this goes live, I am going to be a very, very happy person. So, Sebastian, I'm a very happy person at the moment. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, spending an hour with me. And I wish Jeff could be here for this too. I know that you guys also have a great friendship, but I see that friendship continuing for many, many years to come. I look forward to seeing you in Berlin over the summer, if not sooner. And thank you for being here today. I'm going to close out this episode. Remind everybody that we are on the web at idacpodcast.com. We're on YouTube. The quickest way to get there is idacpodcast.tv. That brings you right to our landing page. You'll see all the episodes that we've ever done in 4K video. Actually, I don't think it's 4K, but we'll just say it's sparkling color video, and you can stream it right to your device. Or you can always find us in your favorite podcast apps. That's it. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. And we'll talk to you all on the next one.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. See you next time.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.